Local advocacy groups will be making one final push this week up at the state capitol. The ACLU of Utah is one of them. Marina Lowe is here to discuss the organization's top priorities this session. Marina, great to have you back on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Let's start off with abortion. Two abortion bills. One would ban abortion after 18 weeks, the other on the basis of Down syndrome. You guys have been out opposing those bills. And we can jump right into what will happen, because not even those that support the bills are trying to say they're constitutional.
Right.
They're saying it's worth defending if it goes to that point. Will it go to that point?
I think so. So putting aside, the Down syndrome bill actually has trigger language in
Right.
it, so it won't go into effect anytime soon anyway. But the
Probably
18-week
interesting to
ban,
note there, we should say that it will wait until courts already weigh in on other states, right?
That's right.
Okay.
A court of higher authorities, the Supreme Court, 10th Circuit, something along those lines.
Okay.
But the 18-week ban, yeah, I think everybody sort of concedes that it's unconstitutional per se. And then the question is really, what will the courts do with it? It's pretty significant to note that the 10th Circuit, which is our circuit here in Utah, there are other states in the 10th Circuit as well, has already struck down a ban on abortions post 20 weeks when the legislature tried that back in the 90s. So we have direct case law on point within our circuit on this question. So it seems clear that yes, there will be a lawsuit that follows if the legislature decides to go this route.
A lot of the argument has been, look, that was 20 years ago. We have new information now. What has been your take along that we have new information now, and maybe it is time to look at starting to lower that threshold?
Well, you know, if you look at the cases that have been filed, these so-called pre-viability cases that come after legislation, courts have continued to strike down these bills in more recent years as well. So it's not just back in the 90s that courts were saying that Roe v. Wade speaks to the question of when the state can step in and prohibit an abortion pre-viability.
Let's move on to some criminal justice reform bills that you guys are backing as well. One would reduce the day for a misdemeanor. Talk about first what that bill does exactly.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool bill. It reduces misdemeanor sentences by just 1 day, which might sound minor, but there's this interesting sort of overlap between state law and federal law. State law here in Utah defines a misdemeanor as having a possible sentence of 365 days or less. Federal law, federal immigration law, says that legal immigrants, so green card holders, refugees, can be automatically deported for what they call an aggravated felony. But the problem is they define an aggravated felony as a crime that carries a sentence of 365 days or more. So you see the problem. It's in that one day of overlap.
So you shave off 1 day, and then it has a huge implication on immigration, as you mentioned.
It makes clear that misdemeanors are misdemeanors, felonies are felonies, and you're not going to have somebody, a long-time refugee who's lived in Utah for 40 years, who commits shoplifting, be automatically deported for that particular crime.
One other interesting bill that Representative Craig Hall ran had to do with electronic privacy. Essentially, if you want our information that's stored on our devices, get a warrant. Yeah,
this bill is great. It actually says even more than just the information on our devices. But for example, when we share that information with a third party, let's say, you know, a photo sharing site or Dropbox, or when that third party has information about how we use our services, so let's say a cell phone service provider might have information about all the calls that we make, the locations we travel to based on when our phone pings cell towers. All of that information now under this bill would also be subject to a warrant.
Yeah, pretty important, because no doubt third parties have our information.
They sure do, and that information, as we all know, tells a lot about who we are, where we go, the places we visit, the shops we go to, the churches we visit.
And then all of a sudden advertisements for those very places end up in our news feeds, right?
All the time.
All right, one more, record expungement.
Yeah.
Talk about the impact that bill could potentially have.
So this is a bill being run by Representative Hutchings, a really great piece of legislation that would allow for automatic expungement of low-level crimes after a certain number of years. If somebody, you know, dots all their I's and crosses all their T's, after 5, 6, 7 years, those crimes would just automatically disappear from their record. Incredibly important, because we know there are more and more Americans every year that have criminal records, and these types of records stand in the way of people when they're trying to get back on their feet, when they're trying to get a job, when they're trying to find somewhere to live, the things that help them get their lives back in order.
And this goes along with Representative Hutchings' huge effort in criminal justice reform a few years ago.
Yeah, he's been a great supporter of really trying to figure out ways to make our criminal justice system work better.
All right, here we go down to the final 4 days of the session. It'll be a fun, well, it's really more than 4 days when you count that you're there pretty much all day, right?
Those are long, long days.
They are. All right, we'll see you up on the Hill. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
For
thanks
the
so
program.
much for having me.
Still to come, the U.S. Supreme Court refuses to take up the Utah GOP lawsuit against SB 54, officially putting an end to the court battle. Our panel debates after the break.